On some of the watch-alongs and Twitter pages last night, Tottenham fans were going mental on the performance against Galatasaray, and to be honest, it shocked me. We played a half-and-half team, of which two of those first teamers then went off at half-time, in potentially the most difficult atmosphere in Europe, and we only lost 3-2. Sure, it could have been worse, and of course our passing, particularly out from the back, could have been much better. This is what learning is all about, and I'm here for it, and I will discuss it more in today's episode. Also, the serialization of Hugo Lloris's autobiography is out, and he is damning when it comes to the small club mentality of Daniel Levy in particular. I'll be discussing some of those quotes and more on today's episode of the Spurred On podcast. Guys, thank you so much for your support and tuning in as ever. Please do like this video, press the like button so that more Spurs fans can see it. Also, do subscribe to my channel for daily Tottenham Hotspur content. Really appreciate your support, guys. But let's get going with last night's 3-2 loss at Galatasaray. Look, like I said in the opening there, just one of the most difficult games you can have in Europe. I said it when the draw was made. People thought we had a pretty easy group, and we've done well to win the first 3 out of 3 in the Europa League. But going to Galatasaray was always going to be the hardest game. That alongside actually Rangers away at Ibrox, where it'll be a similarly fervent atmosphere. What I would say about Galatasaray over Rangers, though, is that they are technically far superior. And therefore, that's why they had the majority of the ball last night. Whereas I think at Rangers, when we go there in the Europa League, we will be more on the front foot possession-wise. But also, he picked a half-and-half team. I've spoken all this week about how, in my mind, this was a bit of a free hit and more about kind of the experience and the learning process for the players and the project as a whole. And that's why, despite the fact we lost 3-2, despite the fact we gave the ball away a lot and we should have conceded more goals, there are positives to take from it. There really are. Will Lankshire's first goal for Spurs, a composed finish, a goal that was set up completely by the youth of Tottenham Hotspur. Archie Gray with a beautiful crossfield ball to Brennan Johnson, who could swipe at it with a shot, knowing how many goals he scored from those positions, but instead sees Will Lankshire in a brilliant position. And what a volleyed cross that was. Really beautiful, perfect weight. What a touch. And Lankshire could easily, on the half volley, have scooped that over the bar, but he doesn't. Hits it into the roof of the net for his first senior goal at such a young age. And you know what I loved about it as well? The way he celebrated. He didn't celebrate as if this is abnormal. He just kind of put his arms out. He's like, this is me. And now, a lot of you are going to be thinking, well, why are you bigging up Will Lankshire? He got sent off and it ruined our chances. Well, I would say I actually like that he showed a bit of bite there. He felt that he was fouled and he was like, fuck this. And he went to get the ball back, and it was a bad tackle. I think it was a yellow card. I've seen some people on the watch-alongs from last night say it wasn't a yellow card. Personally, I think it was a yellow card. He deserved to get sent off for a second yellow, but he will learn from that. Just remember how David Beckham had to learn when he kicked Simeone against Argentina in the World Cup. You learn from it. You learn that you can't chase and win all your battles straight away. You have to be more subtle about it. And I think Will Lankshire will learn from that, and it will benefit Spurs. I love the fact that he's a stone-cold finisher. And I think even though he's not small by any means, but he will fill out. And I think he is a prospect for the future. So that, to me, is very exciting. I also thought, considering how much abuse we've given him over the last kind of 18 months or so, Fraser Forster made some important saves. He's a big old brute. But looks like as a reserve player, as a reserve keeper, he is someone we can call on. I mean, let's hope we don't need to. We need to keep Vicario fit. But he made some important saves. Look, the reality is, I think Radu Dragusin is getting a lot of stick. And under pressure, and Galatasaray in that atmosphere, with those fervent fans, they pressed him, and they pressed him hard, and he gave away the ball on too many occasions. But again, 22, 23-year-old player, he has to learn, and he's going to have to learn the hard way. And Ange Postecoglou and Johan Lange saw enough in him to bring him over for £30 million, and Bayern Munich wanted him. Let's not forget, he is not a bad player. He's a good defender, but he's got to get better on the ball, and there will be no harder atmospheres for him to try and play football in than last night. And my overall positive about that loss last night is that, again, similar to that Chelsea game last season at home, even though we were in utter adversity, they kept on playing the same way. They kept on playing how Ange wanted them to. Football, football, football. It would have been easy for them to just go long over and over again, but they didn't. Dragusin kept on trying to play. Yes, he was giving it away, but he kept on doing the right things, and that will help us in the long run. I'm sure of it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think I'm just being too positive now? Is that what you think? That's fine. Let me know in the comments. We'll have a chat about it. Let's get the conversation started. Ange Postecoglou spoke last night. He said this: obviously disappointing result. First half wasn't great. We just didn't handle things well at all, particularly with the ball. Just really wasteful and gave it away too many times unnecessarily. That allows them to get a foothold in the areas that they're good at. They've got some good players in the front third, and we just allowed that to happen way too often and ultimately paid a price for it, because I thought, we always finish strongly, and I knew we would in the second half. Obviously, going down to 10 men didn't help, but even with 10 men, I thought we probably played our best football. We did all game and got our second goal, had some opportunities to get a third, but I thought we were looking the better side. So, disappointing outcome, unfortunately brought on by a disappointing first half. I want to mention there the goal we got back, Dominic Solanke. Now, it was a beautiful finish, and a lot of people will be concentrating on that finish, but I'll tell you what I saw in it that I loved even more than the finish. Check it out again if you don't remember it. He makes a run and he basically shoves the defender out the way and goes wrong side of him to get in front of him to get across to that near post. And I love that about Solanke, because sometimes earlier in the season, he was a bit passive, waiting for the ball to come to the perfect place. But he realised when Porro had that much space, he had to make the run to get in the right area himself. And he was cold about it, just shoved the defender out of the way, and that bodes really well. He's scoring goals now, and he's sniffing it out, and I really like that. Ange Postecoglou went on to say, I just felt it was self-inflicted. We had really simple solutions out there to keep the ball. It wasn't that hard. We showed it with 10 men. We just needed to be stronger on the ball and play the kind of football we play every week. Maybe it was a little bit because of the changes I made and the environment and the atmosphere, but the moments that stick out to me were giving the ball away. We were playing through them quite easily with 10 men, but with 11 men, we had nowhere near the conviction, and that was disappointing. Well, what I'd say about that, from my opinion, let me know if you think differently, is I think when we went down to 10 men, Galatasaray dropped off their intensity a little bit. They knew that the game was probably theirs and that they could just play the ball around a little bit more, and therefore that's why Ange sees it as us finding it harder to play our football when we had 11 men than 10. I think the intensity dropped a bit and there was more space around. But I could be wrong. Let me know what you think. That's just what I thought from afar. Ange talked about our efforts in possession. He said in the first half, as he mentioned, we gave the ball away too much. We lacked composure and we allowed Galatasaray to get a foothold in the game, and we paid the price for that. In terms of the youngsters playing tonight, he said it's not easy when you're playing away in Europe. You can only allow them to learn and grow by exposing them to it. The 3 teenagers in the starting lineup, I think they'll learn a lot from tonight, and hopefully it helps with their development. Exactly what I was saying, really, isn't it? Will Lancashire, that will be experience that is second to none in terms of his development. That will be worth 25, under 23 or under 21 games, Premier League 2 games. Just the physicality of that game, the intensity and the atmosphere, and he got a goal in that. There will be fewer, harder places to get goals, make the right run and get a good finish in, and I'm really pleased for the boy. I am. Sure, he won't be able to play in the next Europa League game, he'll be suspended, but he will get more minutes in this Europa League group phase, and maybe he can notch a couple of more goals, and I'm sure the club are pointing to him, showing him Harry Kane's development and how that happened. Well, he's a couple of years ahead of Harry Kane in his development, I think, and he looks like a good player. Next thing he needs to do is really start to fill out the way that Kane did. Kane really started filling out from kind of 21 onwards, and Lancashire's only 21. And talked about Galatasaray a little bit more specifically. He said, we expected a tough game. Obviously, they've been in good form all year and undefeated at home. And I thought the game was as I expected. They have some dangerous players and you need to control the game with the ball better than we did tonight. I think that first half ultimately cost us the game and it was disappointing. Galatasaray are a good side. We know that. They're in a good position in the Europa League, as are we. Hopefully that continues. Well, as I said, a lot of people in the podcasts that I love listening to, the Spurs podcasts and on the channels, were saying, as I was, that last night was a bit of a free hit and we got the defeat as I kind of expected. But now it's vital that we jump back, bounce back in the next Europa League game to make it then 12 points out of 15, because we've dropped from being in second place in that Europa League table down to about 7th, and you really need to be, but you want to be in that top 8, which will then allow you to miss out the last 32 game in the new year. Ange talked about Archie Gray's potentially, so I think we'll get so much more growth out of him because he's not even playing in his correct position yet. I love Archie Gray on the ball. He's got a lot of learning to do, of course he does, but what better way to learn than just playing minutes, even if they are out of position. I've said it earlier this week. I think he could be like our next Steve Perryman, a player who plays all across different positions and ends up making like 500, 600, 700 appearances for Spurs. If we can keep him at the club and just keep him ticking over, learning, and soon enough, in the next year or two, he will break into that first team in his favoured position, which is kind of the 6 or 8 role. So, that's kind of my main thoughts on the Galatasaray game. I'm not that negative about it at all. I think it'll benefit us hugely in the long run. But let me know what you think in the comments. Ange did talk before the game about our injuries. He says Richarlison, as we knew, has injured his hamstring, will be out for a while. Romero's, though, is nothing too serious, and he has a chance for the weekend. So that was a surprise to me. Timo Werner has a little bit of a groin issue. That's why he didn't play against Galatasaray. And Mikey Moore didn't travel because he had an illness. But hopefully that will be gone by the weekend too. So only the Richarlison news is bad on that front. Dominic Solanke did a little interview talking about how he's feeling, and of course he got his goal yesterday, which will only increase the confidence. He says, I feel great. Obviously, we've got a lot of games this season which we want to win. Obviously, there's a lot of competitions we want to do well in and go for, so we're going to need everyone. But yes, me personally, I'm quite a fit person. I like to work hard. So I think with the staff that we've got, everyone's looking out for us and making sure we get right for each game. So we're thankful for that. I was pleased he didn't start last night. His pressing is just so, he just works so hard that I wanted him to get a little bit of a break, a little bit of a rest. I'm glad he did, and I need him fit and firing for that Ipswich game because, as we've mentioned all too many times, our form going into international breaks in the Premier League has been so poor, and I'm desperate for us to go into this international break with a win against Ipswich. It will not be an easy game. They will come and play their football. They will make some chances for sure, but they have the second leakiest defence in the Premier League this season, and surely there will be chances for us as well. There should be a lot of space on that Tottenham Hotspur pitch on Sunday, and I hope we can make some chances and put them away and potentially go into that international break above Arsenal. If they only draw or lose against Chelsea, then the narrative surely has to change round, because if we beat Ipswich, we'd then be above them going into the international break, and the script then can change from Arsenal being title challengers and Spurs being terrible to, look, they're not that far away from each other, are they? Okay, now I want to talk a little bit more about Hugo Lloris's serialization of his autobiography. It's called Earning My Spurs. It's coming out in the next week or so, but some quotes have come out in the papers. Just before I go into it, please do press that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel for daily Spurs content. Also, please do go and listen to this when you're running or driving on the audio podcast platform, Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Go over there, type in the Spurred On podcast, give me a little follow and subscribe. So Hugo Lloris first, I'm going to talk about what he said about Antonio Conte. He said, I found Antonio Conte to be quite a character, driven by victory, which gave him energy, but he found it very hard to control his frustration when we started drawing, let alone losing, because his inner torment had to get out. And if he was tormented, then everyone had to share that torment too. And things could get very complicated very fast. He told me once that in any given week, his happiness lasted an hour just after winning, and that was it. In training, he oversaw everything, organising tactical sessions with 10 outfield players against 1 goalie. But it was hard for the creative players to find their places in his restrictive gameplay. The rigidity of the structure and set sequences did us a lot of good at first, but after a few months, teams learned how to play against us, and it became tougher to win. During matches, Conte was as extreme and eruptive as he appeared, garnering respect and fear. Such a strong personality pushed wingers to prefer to play on the side opposite the dugout. I've never forgotten our first defeat under Conte, a 2-1 loss to NS Mura in Slovenia in the UEFA Conference League. Even though I wasn't playing, I was still entitled to his screams and reproaches, just like everyone else. In squad meetings, we would spend at least 30 minutes a day doing video analysis, not forgetting the interminable preparation camps at our training centre. After the defeat in Maribor, he had screamed, Mura, Mura, who's Mura? We lost to Mura. I can still hear him. If a player needed a little love, he'd better not knock at Conte's door, for Conte trust is earned in training. He has no filter, he's sincere. He's honest. He's a manager who lives only by results, whereas from a player's perspective, performance is important too. That season when we lost 3-2 to Manchester United, Ronaldo's hat-trick game, a result which didn't reflect our performance, I told Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and Harry Kane in the dressing room, they may have just beaten us, but I bet you we finish above them. And so we did, ending up in 4th place after battering Arsenal 3-0 on the last few days, situating ourselves halfway between Conte's demanding nature and a little self-management because by dint of being whipped and screamed at, we eventually stuck our fingers in our ears. So, I mean, what a fascinating insight into the world of being managed by Antonio Conte. And I don't know if any of that really comes across as surprising, and it really kind of doubles down on my thoughts about Conte. Is he an elite manager? Yes. Is he absolutely world class? Does he know how to win games? Does he have that kind of intensity of defensive understanding to get clean sheets and make it hard to beat his team? Absolutely. But does he have the management skills for the modern day footballer? And I don't mean Hugo Lloris, who's older and has played under, managers like Mourinho and has won World Cups and has been playing for 15, 20 years. I'm talking about the modern day player who needs a bit more of an arm around the shoulder and doesn't need to be screamed at all the time. And I think that is where Conte really, really struggled. And I think that's kind of what Lloris was saying. Listen, it worked for the first 6 months and that football was magnificent that we were playing, mostly on the counter-attack, but absolutely battering sides. But when the draws started coming, as Hugo said, and the defeats, and Conte would get more and more angry, the players just sunk into their shells, put their fingers in their ears, and didn't want to play for him. And it's a sad indictment, I think, of maybe the mentality of some of those players. They were kind of more interested in their kind of day-to-day feelings than they were about wanting to do whatever it took to make Conte happy and therefore win games. But it's the modern-day footballer and things evolve, and that for me is why managers such as Jose, such as Antonio Conte, didn't work at Spurs. Now, a lot of you will look at me and say, well, Conte's got Napoli absolutely buzzing and firing, and that's true, and he's in the first 6 months there, so that makes sense, doesn't it? Because the players are suddenly going, well, we had a terrible season last season, this guy is getting us winning, so let's listen to him. But can he sustain that over the whole season? Maybe he can in Italy. Italian players far more disciplined in terms of tactical structure and defensiveness. And fans in Italy don't mind their teams playing defensively. But at Spurs, the fans did mind. And sure, it's okay when they're winning. But when the win stopped coming, the defensive football antagonised the fans, and that, I think, in the end, amongst many other things, including obviously all of the health problems that Conte had and the fact that some people close to him died, unfortunately, including our fitness coach Gio, that was what led to the end of Antonio Conte. Hugo Lloris goes on now to speak about Daniel Levy and the Champions League final. And if you haven't heard these quotes, they are, like I said in the opening, absolutely damning. He said, "We do all have one engraved memory, though. 4 days before the Champions League final, Daniel Levy called us all together to announce that, with the support of a sponsor, we would each receive a luxury aviator watch from the club. At first, we were excited to see the elegant boxes. Then we opened them and discovered that he'd had the back of each timepiece engraved with the player's name and Champions League finalist 2019. Finalist. Who does such a thing at a moment like this? I still haven't got over it, and I'm not alone. If we'd won, he wouldn't have asked for the watch's back to have winner engraved instead. I have considerable respect and esteem for the man and all he has done for the club as chairman. I got to know him, but there are things he is simply not sensitive to. As magnificent as the watch is, I have never worn it. I would have preferred there to be nothing on it. With an engraving like that, Levy couldn't have been surprised if we'd been 1-0 down after a couple of minutes. So it was written. At the post-match reception at the hotel, I had the impression that some people from the club and certain players were not sufficiently despondent at having lost. I would have liked people to come up to me and say, 'Don't worry, Hugo, never again. We'll give you the means for a comeback.' But when I returned to my room on the night of the final, I think I had the same feeling as Maurizio and Harry. Does the club really want to win? Real Madrid would never have celebrated a lost final, and we shouldn't have either." So that is pretty damning, and I have to say, and I'm not being, not being a happy clapper or a Levy apologist, but I think it's kind of Levy all over, which is he wants to show willing, and he wants to show that he has the players at heart. You know, Danny Rose talked about, didn't he, how, you know, it's all business with Daniel Levy, but as soon as it's not a business thing and it's like friendship, then, you know, he's really kind and he wants to help you. And I think he thought that was like a personal touch, giving them the watches that would make them feel proud and special. But then it is just a bizarre thing to get it engraved with Champions League finalists, because we're talking about elite players here at the top of their games who want to win, especially someone like Harry Kane, whose whole career is being battered because he's not won anything. And so to put Champions League finalists on the back of that is just almost like it's like jinxing it, isn't it? It's like saying that's good enough. That is good enough. And as the chairman of this club, you know, I never thought that would happen, and that is enough for me. And that, I think, does play into the feelings of people who want ENIC out and Levy out, which is like, it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be a situation where they push for the win. That's what I'm thinking. And I understand that. I really do. And what's sad about it is where Hugo talks about him not being sensitive to kind of the feelings and the desires and the drive of elite sportsmen. I think that's true. And that's why I think manager after manager at Tottenham has kind of come back after their tenure and just been like, I wasn't quite given the tools that I needed, because Levy won't go that extra mile. And that is something, even though I'm not like, you know, I'm not a staunch supporter of Levy. I'm not Levy in or Levy out. I think he's a great businessman, has done amazing things for this club. But I will agree that in terms of going the extra mile, this is another great example of how he's not willing to. Hugo went on to talk about Levy more, and Pochettino said, when you look at the last 3 years, Spurs have been really active in the transfer market, investing lots in new players on freshness, and that's what the club needed to create a new dynamic. After the Champions League final, the club was not ready to invest because there was also the new stadium to pay back and there was COVID. Daniel always tried to make the right decision for the club, and we were also a bit unlucky. At our best with Maurizio, we had to compete with the Chelsea of Abramovich, the Man City of Guardiola, and the Liverpool of Jurgen Klopp. It was really tough because if the club was ready to invest £50 million, the others would invest £100 million. But I feel we didn't give the high credit that Maurizio deserved because he brought a new generation of players, Christian Eriksen, Dele Alli, Harry Kane, and many more, to a new level. He created something really special in the building. You could feel the unity, and we really enjoyed competing for each other. We brought the club to the next step, but we had 3 finals, and we could not score 1 goal in those games. And that's true, isn't it? And that, you know, I agree with everything he says about Pochettino, which is, you know, he was an incredible manager for that set of players at that time, brought them onto another level. I don't know if any other manager would have brought that squad together in the same way and make us very nigh unbeatable. But also true, we made it to 3 finals and we didn't score a single goal in those finals. And I'm not going to say that's Pochettino's fault. I think it's potentially a mentality fault of the club where there just wasn't enough belief. And maybe that was a step too far for Pochettino to instill that belief. And actually, one thing I'd say about Ange Postecoglou is I get the feeling with him is that if we did get to a final, he would know how to say the right things. I'm not saying that we'd definitely win that final, but he'd know how to say the right things to get those players absolutely pumped up. Lloris talked a little bit about Ange's Tottenham now. He said, I really like what I see and I believe they are going in the right direction. They have a proper football style, a mentality, and I think Postecoglou brought exactly what the club needed at this moment, freshness and a new fan expectation. That's probably why I felt really heavy when we were with Jose or Antonio. It was a different football style. So exactly what I've been saying, you know, it wasn't enjoyed, that style, by the players, and as soon as the results stopped happening, the wins, they weren't into it. They really weren't. He said, as long as you keep winning, there's no problem. But as soon as you start to lose 1 game, 2 games, the fans get even more frustrated. And you could feel it at the stadium under Jose and Conte. Ange has a great personality, and I think he's building something important. Everything can change from one day to another, but I think this team has character and personality to keep growing. I think they're going to compete for trophies this season, like a League Cup. Well, I agree with you, Hugo. I think we are going to compete for the League Cup, but I'm hopeful we can win the League Cup and then go on to win the Europa League as well on the momentum of that winning feeling. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Hugo Lloris's comments in his book. I love the honesty. He's very French in his honesty, very sincere, straight down the line. I don't think Daniel Levy will be a happy man this morning hearing that stuff and getting yet another dig in the ribs from a former player whilst the player is saying I have full respect for him. But he's being honest, and Levy sometimes is the architect of his own downfall. Just a couple of other bits of news before I go, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As ever, do press that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Management from KVC Westerlo in Belgium and Spurs met this week and have agreed that the success of both Alfie Devine and Luka Vuskovic on loan at the Belgium club has paved the way for further collaboration between the two clubs moving forward. So I wonder if that could be like an unwritten thing where we send more players on loan to Westerlo, or maybe even, I don't know, some kind of sister club investment down the line. Let's see what happens. And finally, just a bit of something funny. Mohamed Kudus at West Ham, one of their best players, his 3-game suspension for the huge fight that he tried to cause against Spurs has been extended to 5 games for violent conduct. Hilarious. He tried to punch Mickey van der Ven, kick Mickey van der Ven, then tried to punch Pape Matar. And just always hilarious to see a West Ham player, especially as good as Kudus, getting his just desserts. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and listening. Have a great weekend. Let's try and enjoy that Ipswich game. Get behind the boys if you're at the stadium. Let's make it a victory, our first victory going into an international break for a long, long time. And who knows, maybe next week we can be talking about how we're above the scum from down the road. Come on, you Spurs.